Imagine losing power for one rainy night. Annoying, right? Now stretch that night into 6 rainy weeks. Remove your walls, your matches, your dry clothes, and keep the temperature hovering just above freezing the whole time. That was an ordinary season for most of human history. We love talking about the dramatic threats our ancestors faced. Predators, glaciers, migrations. But the thing that quietly killed more people than almost anything else wasn't dramatic at all. It was rain. Cold, endless, unglamorous rain. So how did a hairless, clawless primate not just survive that, but spread into every rainy corner of the planet? That's what this video is about. Rain itself doesn't kill you. What kills you is what wet skin does to your temperature. Water pulls heat away from the body roughly 25 times faster than air. That single fact explains why a mild 10 degrees Celsius evening with wet clothes and a light breeze can be more dangerous than a dry, freezing one. No ice required, just water, wind, and time. Early humans had no word for hypothermia, but they understood the pattern perfectly because they watched it happen. Someone got soaked, got cold, got confused, and didn't wake up. That lesson, learned the hardest way possible, is why staying dry mattered more to them than almost anything else. More than hunting, more than finding food. We think of fire as something you start. Ancient humans thought of it as something you keep alive. Starting a fire from wet wood and wet tinder with bare hands is brutally hard, even for someone experienced. So instead, groups treated fire like a heartbeat, something not allowed to stop. Embers were wrapped in slow smoldering moss, fungus, or specific bark, and carried for hours as groups moved. Cultures across the globe solved this the same way independently, which tells you how universal the need was. And tending that ember wasn't a side task, it was somebody's job. Not hunting, not foraging, sitting with the fire, shielding it, feeding it. Likely one of the earliest specialized roles in human history. Forget the caveman image. Caves are rare, often already occupied by predators, and usually cold and damp anyway. Most ancient humans built their own shelter. Some of the oldest known deliberate structures date back roughly 400,000 years. Branches angled so water ran off, leaves layered like shingles, each row shedding rain onto the one below. The exact logic of a modern roof, discovered through trial, error, and getting rained on until it worked. Later, mammoth bone shelters in Ice Age Europe took the idea further. Bones anchored against wind, hides stretched tight across the frame, insulation built in. And processing raw hide into something waterproof, scraping, stretching, treating with fat, smoking, is genuinely one of history's most underrated inventions. The work happens over days, the payoff arrives weeks later, in a storm. That's planning across time, applied to a problem that doesn't exist yet. Today we check an app. Ancient humans checked everything else. The smell before rain, birds flying low, insects swarming, shifting wind, the exact texture of clouds. None of it was mystical. It was pattern recognition, refined over a lifetime and passed down through generations, giving groups hours of warning to finish a shelter before the sky opened. Terrain mattered just as much. Cold air sinks and water pools in low ground, so camping in a slight dip instead of a slight rise could mean the difference between a damp night and waking up in a puddle. South-facing slopes dry faster. Dense canopy intercepts real rainfall. None of this lived in a book. It lived in memory and story, passed forward so the next generation didn't relearn it the hard way. There's a physical side too. Regular cold exposure genuinely trains the body, blunting the cold shock reflex behind many modern cold water deaths, and shifting metabolism toward more efficient heat generation. Ancient humans weren't biologically superhuman. They were conditioned, generation after generation, by an environment that never let them turn up a thermostat. Rain survival was a team sport. A group huddled together loses far less heat than any individual would alone, so sleeping arrangements in bad weather were dense and communal. Privacy is a luxury only dry weather affords. Labor split naturally too. The strongest fed the fire and gathered material. The most experienced made the calls on shelter and movement, and children stayed protected at the center. When food ran short during long wet stretches, groups shared rather than hoarded, because a group that shares survives together while one that hoards falls apart individually. It's also why elders were cared for long after they stopped hunting or foraging. They weren't dead weight, they were institutional memory, which slope drained fastest, which bark burned slowest, which signs meant a storm was hours away instead of days. Losing an elder cost the group decades of hard-won knowledge, not just a person. Ancient humans didn't just tolerate wet climates. They moved into some of the wettest places on Earth: monsoon Southeast Asia, coastal rainforests, flood-fed river deltas. Because wet environments are rich environments. Rain feeds rivers. Rivers feed fish. Wet forests feed plants and game. The same rain that made survival hard also made the land generous. They weren't fighting the rain, they were negotiating with it. The maintained fire, the angled roof, the waterproofed hide, the reed sky, the shared warmth. Together, they form a survival system built from nothing but attention, memory, and time. We have Gore-Tex and central heating now, but all of it is downstream of someone, tens of thousands of years ago, figuring out how to make it to morning with nothing but an ember and the people around them. That's not primitive. That's the foundation everything else was built on.